Right, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to speak at an ALPS event, and it's a particular pleasure to do so amongst such esteemed and pleasant company. Now, this is my second speaking engagement of the day. I kicked off in Newcastle this morning at a conference on World War I. So if I drift off and start talking about the poetry of Wilfred Owen, I trust our chair will bring me back to heel. When I sat down to think about the topic that you'd set, I must admit, when I was sitting in my study, I rather felt like one did in the days when you were doing your finals and you were suddenly anxious because you'd hit the last question on the list and it was the toughest of the lot and you were really wondering whether you had all the answers to hand. So it's an interesting challenge. I've got 10-15 minutes to do so, and I'm hoping to share some of my thoughts and ideas which I hope will inform our discussion later. I've spent all of my professional life in academic libraries. I started work in the print era, which dates me somewhat. I cut my teeth as a manager on that dreadful phenomenon called the periodicals review exercise, which we used to engage upon every 3 to 4 years. I managed resource budgets and services through the brief flowering that was the CD-ROM generation, where we had huge rooms full of servers of them. And I led the development of e-journal and e-book services that my son's generation of university students now take for granted. And from the start of my career, I have worked very closely with publishers, and the professional partnerships and indeed friendships that I've formed through this work are extremely important to me. But like all successful partnerships and friendships, they can go through rocky moments. And those that weather the storm are those that I find are based on equality, on trust, on openness, and a willingness to adapt and change as our circumstances alter. Which leads me to my first reflection on our relationship as customers, as competitors, which, there we go. Oh, there we are. Nice quote from Yeats. How do we, and I mean us and you, how do we respond to change? We're in the midst of the most significant period of change in scholarly communication for centuries. Open access is turning the traditional subscription model well and truly on its head and will eventually, in my view, supersede it entirely. The only real certainty for all of us is that more change will come, for sure. Now, as a manager, and you will know this as well as I, managing change is one of the most challenging things we do, and depending on how you feel about the process, you do many things. You can choose to confront it, you can deny it, you can try and avoid it altogether, and there are various strategies for coping with this. I don't know what yours is. We seem to do something in our organisation that involves ice floes and penguins. Seems to work. However, the core message that comes across is pretty similar. To survive and thrive in a climate of change, you have to engage with it. Dare I say it, you even need to embrace it. Now, my fundamental outlook in life is a sunny one. I'm definitely with the cup half full rather than half empty. So I'm engaging with this challenging world of scholarly communication, not least because I recognise that in so doing, I am better able to shape it and influence it in a way that I believe will work for my organisation. Now, if we accept, and some people may not, that the publishing models that are going to survive and prosper in the age of open access are going to be, in many ways, completely different to those we've worked with till now, where does your company sit on that change spectrum? I pose that as a thought. My next thought. In a world of scholarly communication, in the subscription world, the primary dialogue has often been between the librarian as the customer, the paying customer, and the publisher. And that's because we, as agents of our academic community, we pay the bills and we sign the licenses. In general, our researchers are not interested in whatever it costs to secure the journal. All they're concerned about is are the resources that they need to carry out their teaching and research there when they need them, preferably just at the one click of a button. That's what they're interested in. So all through the years of struggle, when journal price rises were rising higher than the growth in our academic library budgets, in the main, our academic colleagues remained detached from this. They just left it to us. They trusted us to somehow, miraculously on occasion, work it through and sort it all out. But with the growth in open access, researchers can no longer avoid this fiscal reality of scholarly communication, because now it's staring them right in the face. When they're submitting their manuscripts for publication and you're there waiting for your credit card to put in the authorization for the fee. And of course, what's interesting to me, because I get the panic-stricken phone calls when the Dean of Research is trying to submit something, it isn't just the academics, the researchers on the ground who are noticing this change. It's the managers of research, the deans, the pro-vice-chancellors, even in my instance, the director, the executive director, no less, of finance. And the higher up the chain you go, the more perceptive, the more searching that the questions that are now being posed. For example, why are we paying £3,500 to publish in Journal A when it only costs £1,300 to publish in Journal B? What's the difference? Why are we paying colour illustration fees and page charges as well as open access fees? How can that be so? Why are we paying open access fees? This is a recent one from the Executive Director of Finance. Why are we paying open access fees to all the same publishers that we pay significant subscription costs to? Shouldn't there be some offset in this? Now, of course, when the Executive Director of Finance, who has a background in commerce, he hasn't come up the academic route like some of his peers, when he asks these questions, you can be sure he isn't interested in arguments about value added, because that's not quite what he sees. And as an agent of change, he and his fellow financial directors are now becoming significant players, and they will actually start to exemplify that. He who pays the piper calls the tune. This is a different world. They were never involved before. Right. My next opening thought for you to consider. It behoves us all, and I mean us in the most wide sense of that, it's for us as well as you. It behoves us all to remember that success today is no guarantee of success tomorrow, and none of us are immune from this, whether it's in the library sector, and we've just got some fantastic NSS scores. We cannot rest on our laurels, because it could all crumble and disappear tomorrow. And when I came across this score, I'm not sure who I'd nominate as the publishing equivalent of the timeless and classy Coco Chanel, but I do know that there are some innovative players out there, some very innovative publishers who have recognized that it's time to change and to, I think the phrase I like, recalibrate the relationship with scholarly communication, with libraries and with scholars. And I'm really looking forward to working with them as they pilot new business models. And there are several discussions that we're having at the moment. So my final, I hope not too provocative, but thoughtful section that I want to leave you with as a preliminary to our discussions. And I've no reference to the referendum. I'm agnostic on this. We were given this theme of customers as competitors. And it's easy to see those roles when you think of them. I work very much in a visual sense. They almost look like polar opposites. If you had them on a spectrum, it feels to me that the customer side could be there very much on the far left and the competitors over there on the far right. And in general, there are very idiosyncratic characteristics that a customer relationship in the main feels rather more passive. That, you know, you see what's out there, you choose to buy it or you do not. Obviously, if you're a competitor, you can innovate, you're in control of the dialogue, and you can bring out new goods, new services. And I think for many years, librarians in general have been very much there in the more passive side of the customer. We've been very rooted in that role, but we've been on the move for a while. And certainly my stated preference would be to be moving on a journey. But because I like to take a fairly fair and balanced view, I don't see this necessarily as an either customer or competitor. I think there's a very important middle ground that looks a little bit more like partnership, which is premised on a full and fair acknowledgement of the expertise and knowledge that both parties bring to the frame, and that as we are facing the changes together, it's actually putting those skill sets to use to actually navigate a route forward. And that is certainly where my cultural preference sits. However, it's an open world. I think the world we face now is more open, less certain than it's been before. And without a doubt, in some instances, there will be competition from the university presses. And I think if you're as savvy and committed to your world, you should welcome that. So that's really all I wanted to say as an opener, that I think it's a very interesting dialogue that you've opened. I think there are going to be some very interesting, I hope there are going to be some very interesting discussions. But my personal preference is not to polarize it, because I don't think that's actually helpful to either of us. So there you are. That's my start of a 10.